changes in setting resulted also in transition to a new language, in which the Christian tradition would start to express itself in the diaspora. It is reasonable to suppose that the initial phase of the tradition's development was in the language of Jesus himself and his Jewish following, which naturally was the same as that of the land of Israel Jewry at large. With regard to written documents of religious kind from late Second Temple period, we have plenty of evidence coming from the Dead Sea Scrolls, indicating that Hebrew was the language of choice. As for spoken language of the local Jews, and there are good reasons to believe that the initial stage of Jesus' movement ideas transmission was an oral one, the situation is less clear. Starting from 19th century, many scholars argued for Aramaic, a Semitic language from the same family as Hebrew, but of a wider Near East currency, as a spoken language of Jewish masses in the land of Israel at that time. Recently, more and more evidence on Hebrew's role as a spoken language has surfaced, but the jury is still out. We may safely suppose that the initial oral tradition existed in some mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic characteristic to Jewish Palestine of those days, without trying to define the ingredients of that mixture in a more exact fashion. In Christian sources, we find a long-standing tradition that there had also been in existence a written document presenting Jesus' biography in either Hebrew or Aramaic. But this document has never been discovered, and our working hypothesis will be that when speaking of initial Semitic tradition, we mean the oral one. Now, with the moving to Hellenistic Greek-speaking diaspora, Jesus' movement had to translate and rework those original Semitic traditions into Greek, and quite naturally, there also appeared in the diaspora texts composed in Greek from the very beginning. It is at that stage that the tradition also fully embraced written forms of expression, and in fact, all the texts we have at our disposal come from that stage. Some of the Gospels we are going to discuss exemplify the multi-staged process of composition: initial Hebrew and/or Aramaic oral tradition, gradually reworked, edited, and eventually put into writing in Greek. To what extent the Greek tradition still reflects the earlier Semitic stages is an open question, and as always, there are two different schools of thought. The one emphasizes the input of later reworking and editing, thus seeing the Gospels as witnesses to that later phase in the Jewish Jesus follows outlook, reflecting mainly general Hellenistic trends. Another perspective, which we will follow, supposes that even through that later layer of reworking, we can sometimes discern the earlier patterns reflecting that original Hebrew and/or Aramaic thinking.